Hello, patrons, and also welcome channel members on YouTube to your monthly bonus video. This month, my patrons asked me to talk about Legends ZA and my expectations of it compared to Legends Arceus. So yes, let's just get the elephant out of the room. I've opened channel membership. So on YouTube, you can now pledge for similar prices to what's available on my Patreon for similar perks. They're not going to be one-to-one, because some of the perks that exist on Patreon cannot be ported to YouTube. For example, $20 and up patrons get to suggest topics for bonus videos, and then $5 and up patrons get to vote on the suggested topics to decide what becomes that month's bonus video. I can't aggregate the results of polls on two different platforms, so I'm just gonna say that on YouTube, we're not doing topic submission and voting, but YouTube members can watch the bonus videos. So yeah, hope that clears that up. If you're on Patreon, I suggest staying pledged on Patreon and not switching to YouTube, unless you want to use the emotes that are available on my Discord server. I have ported the amount that they will allow me to port over to YouTube, so that's the only unique perk to Patreon on YouTube, is that you have access to 5 emotes for the moment on YouTube from my animated Discord server emotes. Everyone gets access to the Discord. Patreon, YouTube, Twitch, everybody gets access to that. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy to answer them. This will be also explained in the next main channel YouTube video. And your bonus video from last month, the world's vlog, is 2 hours and 50 minutes long. And the editor is still working on it. I hired an editor to make that. You'll probably get this bonus video before you get the other one. So sorry, that's a little weird. But again, I will DM that out to anybody who had to drop their pledge the previous month since I was late on delivering it. Anyway, this month you guys want me to talk about Legends Arceus and Legends ZA. I did like Legends Arceus quite a bit. I think it's my favorite of the Switch generation Pokemon games. To start with, I thought that it was a good way to handle revisiting Sinnoh. They had their remake of Diamond and Pearl that I had no interest in playing and did not have to play. And then they had a new game that also took place in Sinnoh with brand new content, totally different mechanics, new story and everything. And that was something that I was interested in. So I got to ignore the remake and play the new game instead. So I thought that was a cool way to set that up. That way people who want their straight, no frills remakes with no real deviations from the original game can do that, and then I don't have to deal with that at all if I don't want to, which is nice. So Legends Arceus is an interesting game. It's not really, I would say, unique or novel within the open world exploration genre of games. Of all the attempts that Pokemon has made to foray into open world exploration, Legends Arceus does it the best. It's a little bit of a grittier game. It's a bit more rugged, and it offers a different kind of role-playing experience from the main series games. First of all, it takes place in the past, which is a fun, novel concept for a Pokemon game. It also has sort of like a higher difficulty in the base mechanics than the main series games. You have to craft all of your items, which means that you don't have unlimited access to things like potions or Pokeballs. You have to put in a little bit of work to make those things. And you, as a player, can take damage. You can take fall damage, and you can be injured by attacking wild Pokemon, which is the first time they've ever done that. In Colosseum, there's a little bit of like flavored text that sometimes Pokemon in hyper mode will like aim a punch at their trainer, but there's no real mechanical consequences of that in Colosseum. So this is the first time that Pokemon can actually hurt you in the series. So in that way, it's a bit grittier. And not just in like a superficial, shallow way, but in like a tangible, mechanical, tied into the gameplay loop kind of way. Which, as an older Pokemon fan, is something that I'm interested in. I'm looking for games now at this point in my life that have a little bit more going on and a bit higher stakes than the main series Pokemon games have for a bit now. The main story was also a bit political in that you have all these different factions that have different relationships with each other. You're kind of interfering in that relationship. I think there was a moment in the story of Legends Arceus that I and Vidit were heavily contemplating actually writing a video about, because we were so interested by what they did with it. That video obviously never happened, and it probably never happened because of my day job and no other interesting reason that it would have, well, I guess the other reason would have been that I would have had to replay the game to get footage, and it was not the kind of game that I could immediately play through a second time after finishing it once. So I guess that still could happen someday. If I ever get really back into the Switch Pokemon games and I need to revisit them for some reason, I could still make a video about Legends Arceus someday. But yeah, I think that this is the first open world Pokemon game. Open world. It's sort of more Monster Hunter style, where you have your main hub city, and then you go out on expeditions to different sub-maps, which are quite large and expansive. But they're not so large and with so much going on that they can't hold all of the details of what's loaded on each map in memory every time you go in and out, which allows them to have a very consistent Pokemon spawn for that map at any given time. Like if you find a Togepi in one area of the map and then you go do something else and come back, that Togepi will probably still be there. That's the opposite of what they did with Scarlet and Violet, where only the Pokemon in your immediate area exist in that game, and the second you go even like 5 meters away, everything despawns. So having it be in sub-maps allowed for more detailed maps, more detailed interactions between each Pokemon on each map. If each different species of Pokemon had its own predetermined reaction to the player approaching, so some fled, some would become aggressive, Mr. Mime would set up barriers, Abra would teleport, that sort of thing. I think which gave each Pokemon quite a bit of character in the game, and made each area pretty memorable. Your Pokemon could also be out of its Pokeball and interact with the environment. They did this again in Scarlet and Violet, but it felt better executed in Legends Arceus, where you would actually see them like headbutting trees and berries falling out or things like that. I think the crafting element also made it more rewarding to find hidden items on each map. Those items were needed in larger quantities to be resources for crafting things like Pokeballs. And the main gameplay loop of Legends Arceus, I felt, was exploring, finding new Pokemon, catching new Pokemon, using those Pokemon to fill in their, I guess, encyclopedia pages, since it wasn't a high-tech Pokedex in this game. You actually needed to use each one in certain ways in order to fill in the entries, which I thought was cool. And to me, at least, the maps felt intentionally designed to be explored, with some like design set pieces for you to stumble on and find. Things that were placed there intentionally made the maps feel full of things worth exploring and didn't give them that empty feeling that Scarlet and Violet have. And because you explored the map using a ride Pokemon, and there were several different Pokemon that you could unlock to explore the area in different ways, each of the maps was actually designed to be explored in different ways. All of them had verticality to them. There were lots of hills, valleys, rivers, sheer cliffs to scale with Hisuian Weavile. Sneasler, is that what it was called? Weirder could move you very quickly across plains. Basculegion could swim, and Braviary could fly you around. And as you unlocked each of these different modes of exploration, it gave you a reason to go back to previous maps, because now you would be able to reach things that you couldn't previously. Classic old exploration mechanics. It's shocking that Pokemon doesn't have more of this kind of thing, because the environment plays such a huge role in the early Pokemon games. You think it would lend itself very well to open world exploration, but they don't take this approach every time. And in fact, I don't think Legends ZA takes this approach either, but we'll get to that. Arceus does feel like they were taking a lot of cues from Monster Hunter, both in the way that the maps are designed, the crafting system, and those boss battles where you, as a trainer, were running around and throwing things at specific giant boss Pokemon. So yeah, I think Arceus's big win was focusing so heavily on exploration, resource gathering, and Pokemon as a means for interacting with the environment. The battle system was kind of secondary. It was almost an afterthought, it felt like, especially since they changed it to simplify it quite a bit so that you could spend less time in each battle At least that's what I felt like. I honestly avoided battling as much as possible and relied entirely on the stealth mechanics because it gave you another way to have the environment interact with how you are adding Pokemon to your team. For example, in some areas, there's tall grass that you could crouch down and sneak around in. There's like trees you can hide behind. There's like shadows you can hide in. It has stealth mechanics at all. And then you felt skillful when you managed to sneak around and throw the Pokeball without a Pokemon noticing you, and get that extra catch rate increase from having startled them. I think my only critiques of Legends Arceus, one, I didn't love that I could only play as a young kid again. It felt like a sort of more mature story where an older person would have made sense as the protagonist. So honestly, I guess I would just like more of a variety of body types that you can choose from. That might be kind of a big ask for them because there was more character customization as well in this game, but so if you could change your clothes, they would have to make sure that they could look good on all of the bodies that they rendered. So maybe even just options for age would be nice. It would feel nice to be represented in the games that I'm playing. And I don't expect the main series Pokemon games to do that because their core audience is children. But if the Legend series is skewing to a slightly older audience, they could skew the characters up a bit more or give you more options, is what I would think. My only other critique is that sometimes the color schemes in each area were not the prettiest, or maybe the Switch was just not capable of rendering really beautiful environments. It's hard to say. I feel like my ideal Pokemon aesthetic was in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee with lots of watercolors and pastels. I don't expect every game to use that if they're going for something different, but it felt very cohesive. There are some sort of more desaturated, darker tones in Legends Arceus that, in my opinion, don't look the most natural and give it kind of an artificial look. I feel doesn't really go well with a game about exploring an untamed wilderness. That's just me, though. I did appreciate that each map had different lighting for day and night, and seeing each area at different times of day sort of gave the game a wide variety of color palettes, let's say, which I did appreciate. Most of the maps actually don't look that bad. I think the main map that I had this problem with was the beach map, where you have this contrast of like really dark green grass with a white beach and really like unnaturally blue water. I felt like that didn't look the best, but some of the other maps looked fine. I'm not really a graphics person. Like, I've always played on lower end hardware. I don't have great vision in general, so it's not high on my list of demands to have a game have like super high res textures or high fidelity. Like, I don't need it to look like I'm really in the grasslands and then there's a cartoony Shinx right there. I'm okay with it being stylized to be cartoony or even make use of lower res textures if they need to in some places. I can live with that. I'm not gonna be angry about there being a low-res tree texture. I do like a nice color scheme. I feel like color makes an enormous difference when you're going for a stylized nature setting. You can get a lot of believability just with the shade of green that you use. Just using the wrong shades can just make it look artificial and man-made versus looking supernatural, even if it is stylized to be cartoony, if that makes sense. Like, just compare the color palettes in Fire and Leaf Green and their textures and their tile sets, comparing that to like the very, very saturated colors in Hoenn, in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, and you can kind of see a difference. Fire and Leaf Green looks much better on the same system, using the same tools, even without being realistic, just by the colors it chooses. They always choose pastels when they go to Kanto, and I'm not sure why. So, getting into Legends ZA, I was more excited for Legends ZA before I sat down to watch a bunch of ZA trailers in a row for this video. This is why. So I'm not super sure why they decided to make it part of the Legends series. One, it takes place in the future. In that case, it would be a prophecy, not a legend. Two, it looks like exploration will not be a major factor in the gameplay at all. At least that's not what they've shown in the trailers. You can have an open world game take place in a city and have exploration still be fun. I've played a few games that managed this. For example, I recently played the closed beta of Honkai Nexus Anima, which was #sponsored, but their open world design was really nice. It was based in a city, but it was pretty densely populated with things to do and things to interact with. There were anima everywhere to catch and add to your team. There were different side quests around every corner, like multiple in one little area. Everywhere I looked, I would find like some new park or some new set of stores, some kind of focal point of interesting scenery to look at and interact with the anima's abilities to interact with the environment. And Legends Arceus did have a subquest system. You can make a city environment very explorable and fill it with lots of side quests and things like that to make it interesting. So it isn't impossible to have an explorable city. However, in the trailers, the only way that they have shown any verticality in any of the maps is by having the player step on like a teleport warp to send them to the rooftops. And there's no ride Pokemon whatsoever. You are running around and you have like your phone, your device, and that is like the way that it would catch you if you fell off of something in Scarlet and Violet. Your phone catching you if you jump off of a building and giving you kind of like a double jump. It seems to be your only method of exploring the environment. Makes me very nervous. The other concern I have is that every environment except for one appears to be completely flat. So cities in real life are not completely flat. However, most of the environments that they have shown in these trailers are totally flat. I think that that is a concern for a couple reasons. So first, it makes it feel very artificial, because it's not realistic to have totally flat environments even in cities. And two, everything is sort of sequestered into its own little things. So for example, when you're battling, you're in like a little battle force field area where you can't interact with the environment at all. It becomes like devoid of features. You're just in an empty plane battling. And second of all of the areas, like the different habitats where you would go out and do quests and explore in Legends Arceus are now wild areas within the city, may also make them feel even more artificial. It totally loses all of the grittiness and ruggedness of the previous game. There's also no indication that there will be crafting features at all, which I also find concerning. The only thing that they have really focused on in the trailers, and I rewatched all of them, is the battling. The battling is going to be real time, so I expect this to kind of function like, I didn't play the demo, mind you. Jonna played it for me. So I don't know how this feels to play. To me, from watching the trailer, it seems like this is going to be sort of like Knights of the Old Republic, semi-real-time, semi-turn-based. That's what I think. So I think that they expect the main gameplay loop to be just doing a lot of battling in this game. At least that's what I'm getting from the trailers. That the environments are totally flat, like a smooth horizontal plane, because you're supposed to be doing a lot of battling in them, and they didn't want the environment to play a role in battling at all, which is disappointing to me, because I feel like having a real-time action battle system, you would want the environment to play a role. And I'm thinking again of Monster Hunter, where you have to chase monsters through different areas of the environment, and you can do things like ride them and smash them into like cliff faces that are nearby, or have them interact with environmental like hazards, or they'll go into the water if you go into the water. To me, I think that is one of the more appealing things about it being an action RPG. It gives you the potential for some more interesting set pieces and scenarios, whereas all of the battling in the Legends Arceus trailers, I mean, it looks interesting. It's real-time action, and I'm sure there will be a learning curve associated with that as well, but it's all devoid of any features. It's all on a flat plane, and there's nothing environmental to interact with. It's such a shame that they felt like they couldn't do both, that they felt like they had to get rid of everything from Legends Arceus in order to have more of a focus on battling in Legends ZA, and that they couldn't just build on one thing to make the other. Now, I could totally be wrong, and some of the things that are in Legends Arceus might make their way into Legends EA. They just haven't shown it in any of the trailers. So I'm getting worried because the game comes out next month. One of my favorite things to do in Legends Arceus is just to get on Braviary and soar around the map and like just see everything underneath you as you go over the landscape and then dive down to something interesting you see. And there's no indication that you're going to be able to do anything like that in ZA. There's also going to be more of an emphasis on multiplayer. There was almost no multiplayer in ZA. I think all you could do was trade. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was it. There being a whole multiplayer ranking system and multiplayer modes, and the emphasis being on battling, makes me think that this is meant to be sort of more like, I don't want to call it a MOBA because it's too small to be a MOBA. And I think there's still some open world aspects to it, but I don't know. It seems like they're gunning for a totally different audience than the people who liked Legends Arceus. I guess maybe there weren't very many people who got into Legends Arceus, so that's why. It's really hard to say. I think Pokemon video games have a lot of potential to be a lot of things to a lot of people. And I think they're trying to figure out what clicks with the most people, because there's a lot of Pokemon fans right now. At Worlds, 30,000 people were there, but only probably 10% of those people knew anything about the video games. I'm sure they want to get some of the rest of that crowd into Pokemon somehow. So I think that's probably why it's more experimental and feels like almost a totally different genre than Legends Arceus was. That said, I guess the other difference is this has not been announced alongside a remake of Gen 6. In the order that they seem to have been following pretty closely for a long time, they have totally skipped over Gen 5, with the only nod to it being Blueberry Academy in Scarlet and Violet. Not that I feel like they should be making remakes. I typically don't enjoy their remakes, so I'm not complaining that they're not making them. But it does make it very difficult to predict what's gonna happen next. I feel like for a while it was pretty easy to guess what the next Pokemon game would be because they followed the order of remake, main series pretty closely up until Let's Go, which threw a wrench in all of that. I don't think a lack of predictability is a bad thing, but it does make it awfully hard to sort of guess at where the series is going next. It makes it hard from a speculation standpoint to say anything worthwhile. I also should comment on the announcements that we have so far, which is that Legends ZA will have $30 paid DLC at launch. Legends Arceus, some content added to the game after launch, but it was free. Legends ZA is launching with paid DLC, and we already know that at least 2 Mega Pokemon are going to be locked behind it. I heard somewhere that also the Gen 6 starter megas are going to be locked behind it. I guess they realized that TCG people would pay a lot for Pokemon, and they were leaving money on the table by not doing the same thing in the video games. So I guess that's why we're going to be paying for megas now. It's hard not to be cynical about it. I know that Pokemon from the beginning has never been a particularly friendly series to people who are not willing to drop loads of cash on additional content. There's always been that aspect. I'm not going to pretend it's not there. In fact, I've complained about it quite a bit lately, so it doesn't feel right to sort of give the newer games a pass if I've complained about it for the older games. And there's no precedent here really for this, because the only other game in the series didn't do this. It's not like the DLC replacing a third version for the main series games, like with Scarlet and Violet, having the DLC adds more content to the game without needing to release like I don't know, what would the third version be called? A Pokemon Magenta, right? This way you don't have to replay the majority of the unchanged story content for just a little bit extra like you do in Crystal and Emerald, and instead you get to continue your story with the new content. It also doesn't cost as much as a new game, which was not true about Emerald and Crystal. So in my mind, in the main series, the DLC actually makes sense, but for the Legends series, I don't know if this makes that much sense. So I suppose to sort of wrap this up, we can take a look at the new megas which have been announced. The Legends Arceus had Hisuian Pokemon, a few of which were pretty unique to the game, compared to their original counterparts. For example, Basculin was introduced in Gen 5. Hisuian Basculin can evolve into a new Pokemon, Basculegion, which did not exist in Gen 5. Legends ZA does not appear to be doing that. There doesn't appear to be any new regional variants. Instead, we're just getting new Mega Pokemon and the return of Megas to the series. So one thing I never really understood is that there has been this clamor for Megas to come back pretty much since they disappeared. And to me, it seemed pretty clear that each gen, they were introducing a disposable new big battling mechanic and not carrying it forward into the series. This seemed like an okay way to deal with it so that the series wouldn't get super bloated with mechanics. Like, Pokemon Go has Mega Pokemon, it has G-Max Pokemon, you have Pokemon that can both Mega and G-Max. You don't have Z-moves in Pokemon Go because I don't think that would work. But pretty clearly to me, it seemed like instead of Megas, we were getting a new battle gimmick each gen, and that there was never a plan to continue adding Megas to the series beyond Gen 6. We also don't have terrestrial Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Probably for the same reason as Z-moves. Now, I don't actually have a problem with Mega Pokemon coming back after all that ranting. I did enjoy some things about Gen 6. I have fond memories of making teams in Gen 6, learning about each of the new Mega Pokemon, and when I hear the Mega Evolution noise in the trailer, like the hairs on the back of my neck stand up like I've gone back in time. I was fully an adult when Gen 6 came out, so it's not like a beloved childhood game to me, but it was a big part of like a chunk of my life that was pretty important, like my early 20s. So I have some nice nostalgic associations with Gen 6. Not as much as somebody who would have grown up with the games, but some. The Megas are all returning, the original ones from X and Y, and then the ones that they added in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. I'm pretty sure all of them are going to come back. And then here are the new Megas that they've added. Mega Dragonite, which will be probably my favorite of the new Megas. I do like its design quite a bit. I guess I won't really be able to compare it in a functional way to past Megas because the battle system will be totally different in this game. So I won't be able to say like, oh, Dragonite's ability is actually not as good as regular Dragonite with multiscale, or something like that, which was the case for some Megas in Gen 6, like Heracross. In my opinion, Mega Heracross is not as good as Life Orb Moxie regular Heracross. So I don't know if abilities are going to be in this game, like at all, actually. So it doesn't say here what it would be if it had one. I do like that there's a good amount of weird Megas that have been announced. I kind of like weird Megas. I like weird Pokemon, so I like that weird Pokemon picks are getting beefed up. My friends who like wrestling are really excited for Mega Halucha. I can imagine that Mega Malamar is probably actually going to be pretty good because of its typing. Dark Psychic is a killer combo. It also kind of looks like a uterus. And then we have the Megas of the original trio. Now, Mega Greninja, unfortunately, will not be as good as Ash Greninja, because Ash Greninja was a little OP, and they nerfed Protean pretty quickly after they introduced it. We'll see what they do with this guy. Maybe they'll make him OP again. I do like that his Mega has the shiny colors, since shiny Greninja is black. I don't have strong opinions about the other two. I never was that fond of the Gen 6 starters. Gen 6 was kind of like the gen they started making starters by default look like action figures. I would say actually that really started in Gen 4 with Empoleon and Infernape. And then Gen 5, they all looked like animals again. And then from Gen 6, Gen 7, Gen 8, there's only like 2 that look like animals and the rest are action figures. The 2 being Primarina, which you could argue is only half an animal and half of a feminine figure. And then there's Skeledirge, which is just a crocodile. So that one gets a pass. These are just a little like, I don't know, not creature-y enough for me. I prefer Pokemon to look more creature-y, which is what I kind of like about Mega Dragonite, is that it looks creature-y. Looks like a dragon with more animal parts glued on. I can vibe with that. Some people don't like it, but I do. So we have a preview map of what Lumiose is going to be like. It does kind of look like each part of the city, each district, you could say, might have an elemental bias because you have sort of like an all green grass and there's Tyranitar, so actually I don't know. But you have grass, bug, Magikarp, so this seems like the sort of like foresty area. Then over here you have Staryu, Trubbish, Flabebe, Hawlucha. I don't really know if I see a pattern there, but Staryu is not exactly like a forest Pokemon. It's sort of more of an ocean Pokemon. And then over here you also have Flabebe. Is there a Flabebe in each quadrant? So it would make sense, though, that each area gets a unique Flabebe color to make them all available. But then I guess each of these areas doesn't have a visible Pokemon on it at all, so maybe I'm overthinking this. I guess to wrap this up, I'm apprehensive because I did really like Legends Arceus a lot, and I am worried that so far most of the things that I like about Legends Arceus are not in ZA at all. I'm kind of remaining cautiously optimistic because I did just play like the closed beta of Honkai Nexus Anima, and that took place in a city, and I enjoyed that. I thought that the way that they integrated the anima with the environment in that game was really cool. And so I now have a positive basis of comparison, or a negative basis of comparison, where I've just seen a game do something I liked in a similar environment with kind of a similar concept. Now I get to see Pokemon do it, I guess, and we'll see how they do. I kind of wish that I liked modern Pokemon games more. I probably feel similarly to a lot of people my own age. At a certain point, we realized that we were not the target demographic for the games anymore, and then we had to sort of grieve that and no longer expect Pokemon games going forward to have things in it that we enjoy or that are like geared towards the original people who played the video games. I was sad about that for a while, but I guess that sort of takes the pressure off of the new games in a way where they don't have to be good and I can still enjoy the old ones just fine. And then new games that I do enjoy, like Baldur's Gate, for example, do RPG things in a way that is really fulfilling to me. Yeah, I guess I'll just keep up with the main series Pokemon games and see where they go with this in sort of like an observational way to see what happens with Pokemon going forward, because it's definitely going to change quite a bit still, I think, from what it is right now. I think it's gonna continue to change until they land on something that like really captures the public imagination in a way that is very satisfying. And I think that they have some examples of how to do that in the monster genre already that they could follow, and they're mostly choosing not to. I don't know what to make of that. I guess we'll see. So that's that on that. I'm working on a few videos still. I've seen a cut of the world's deep dive video that is 2 hours and 15 minutes long. That's probably the length of the exclusive version, so that'll have everything in it, and that'll be on Patreon and for YouTube members. And then there will be a much shorter version of that that goes on my YouTube channel. And I have asked the editor to try and do that before the end of the month. So we'll see. It's already the 21st, and we'll see. Other than that, I'm trying to write more of the Japan vlogs so that they can sort of like be the next thing that's put into the production phase, since all of the footage for them already exists and all that it needs is some connective voiceover from me. All I have to do is write and record that voiceover and then send everything over. And that kind of opens me up to be able to put more of my time into writing whatever I want or the next big essay thing. And I'm still kind of working on how to do big essays. Right now, I am in an outpatient program, and that takes up about 15 hours a week, on top of already working like 40 hours a week in my day job. So right now, I'm again sort of like feeling spread a little bit thin, but it is becoming fall, which is the season that I tend to get really inspired and want to make a lot of YouTube videos. I have been making a concerted effort to play a lot of video games that I find really inspiring. So I have sort of been thinking about throwing together a video just like recommending games, because I feel like I have at least a handful of games that are really good that people don't talk about that much. So it seems like, okay, I might as well just do like a showcase of them. I don't think it'll do super well in the algorithm or anything, but if it puts more eyeballs on good art that's like fulfilling and fun to engage with and creative, then maybe it's worth doing anyway. And people probably need good art right now to engage with, to get them through all of the everything happening. So yeah, that seems like, when I think about things creatively, the video concept that has the lowest barrier to entry to me right now. So we'll see. I still have a bunch of other stuff I'm working on too that's been like in the pipeline and slowly coming through for a while. It'll get done when it gets done. All right, I hope you guys have had a good September and enjoy the fall, and I'll hopefully see you very soon in last month's bonus video whenever that's done. Okay, bye.